Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I'm Rob Smith, the CEO and founder of Lionfish Tech Advisors. And with me, I have a couple advisors from Lionfish, Scott Nelson and Mark Harris, but I also have the great Roberta Gamble from Four Quarters.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the introduction.
So, very quickly, I want to talk to you about Lionfish. Yes, I'm a child of the 70s and I love Brady Bunch. We were founded just over 4 years ago. We're all a bunch of ex-Gartner analysts, and we thought of a way to do it better, to help the vendor community. I always say the same thing. I had two fundamental problems at my previous employer. The first was, as an analyst, I was never allowed to tell you exactly what I think. And I'm originally from New Jersey, and that means I always want to tell you exactly what I think. And the second problem is that vendors don't give analyst firms the full story. And you can't really blame vendors for that. So, because the analyst firms are rating them, putting them in waves, quadrants, marketscapes, and you can't really trust them. They're going to talk to your potential clients about you, and so you have to curate anything you tell an analyst firm. So I founded Lionfish with a sole goal to be able to help the vendor community be better. What if you could have a former analyst on your staff to assist you? And out of that came a whole bunch of intel and consulting tools that we're going to talk about today, most importantly being the pyramid.
Thanks, Rob. And as you mentioned, I'm Roberta Gamble. I'm the Chief Research Analyst for Forecasters. Forecasters.com is a content hub that helps independent analysts and small boutique firms to post and promote their future-focused content. And it's a place for executives and decision makers to come and see the latest in independent third-party research. And we're collaborating with Lionfish on this exciting new tool. So I'm just going to give you a quick intro to it before we get into the nitty-gritty here. So here, announcing the pyramid. The pyramid is a visual buyer's guide that looks at vendors' performance in the industry, as well as their strategic index, being their breadth of services, their modernity, their updates, and so on and so forth, plotting the companies accordingly, and looking at both incumbents as well as new entrants, sparks, those disruptors in the world. But before we get into that too much, let's talk a little bit about how it's put together, the data
So,
engine behind it.
yeah. So, when you end up answering the same questions all the time, which we did at our former employer, you end up wanting to build tools. And the aquarium came out of that tools. It's the engine of the pyramid. And what we do is we use a combination of AI, and we joke AI is like a small child. You can't leave them alone in a room because you'll never know what they're going to do. AI, the data in AI, depending on who you believe, is anywhere from 50 to 80% accurate. I think it's more like 70 to 80% from what we see, but there's a lot of problems with it. It's out of date. It's there's nothing current. So if there's news that happened yesterday, AI definitely doesn't know about it. And quite frankly, as someone from Jersey, I'm by default a pessimist, and AI is too happy. And so we need some of that advisor skepticism. So this is why every piece of data, and I do mean every piece of data that goes into the aquarium, is human verified by a market expert, two of which are on the call today. And then the aquarium itself is generated with only data from the pyramid. I'm sorry, the pyramid is generated only from data from the aquarium. But the aquarium's a lot more than just a pyramid. We have the ability to generate battle cards. It's probably the number one feature request to be able to do battle cards by job function, to be able to say us versus them, and then to reverse it around to say, how does a competitor look at you? We also have the ability to do custom surveys. So in addition to the values we put in the aquarium and the data we put in the aquarium, well, you get analyst surveys that take up hours of your time or perhaps RFPs, and we have the ability to automatically fill out those for you. Now, it's not perfect, it gets you about 80% of the way there, but instead of spending a few weeks on an analyst survey, you can get it done in a few hours, especially good for those smaller firms. And then one of the big things we always did in our former jobs was SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The vendors always want to know how good they are, what their opportunities are, and who's really coming after them. And so every day with the latest information in the aquarium, we regenerate the SWOT. And then last but not least is the Sonar Score dashboard. I'll talk more about Sonar Score in a second, but this you get a real-time quick view of how everyone stands and how you stand against them.
Great, thank you. And I just want to interject real quick before we talk about how the pyramid is calculated. And just to say, one of the reasons that we decided to create this in collaboration with Lionfish is because we were hearing about some of the challenges in the current models out there. Now, forecasters currently and Lionfish together have a CIO survey currently in the field, and we will be getting some results pretty soon. But early results show that some IT decision makers, CIOs, CTOs, are a little concerned with some of the current models, potential bias from analysts, which we'll address here and how the pyramid is created. There's a perception that could be pay for play, that there's a huge focus on legacy data and existing markets, as opposed to also including new markets, dynamic markets, new players, and also that the data could be outdated. So we think that the pyramid is going to be able to address these concerns and talk a little bit about how that's created.
Thanks, Roberta. So, how do you score a product? This is the infamous question. How do product scores get calculated? Well, one of the biggest problems we've always seen with things like other analyst firms' reports is analyst bias, that there's always that X factor of what does the analyst think. And we wanted to remove that. And so the way we remove that is real simple. By coming up with 52 standard data points, as you see some of them scroll across the screen here, these 52 standard data points, every vendor, every product is scored exactly the same way. Meaning, if you have a social media presence and it's really active, you'll get an 8 or a 9. If you don't, you'll get a 1 or a 2. But here's the big thing. Some markets, social media doesn't matter. So we can also adjust the weights per market. This is also critical. But that still wasn't enough for us because, I might like Microsoft, Cisco, Google, but if you only have 52 standard points, the big guys will always come out unfairly higher. And so what we did is we decided to develop market specific values. These values are custom generated for each and every market. And literally, we don't have to have any, but for every pyramid we publish, there's at least 10. And quite typically, there's anywhere from 15 to 20, but if there was a million values, we could have a million values. There's no limit. And so all these data points are weighted and calculated, and then the scores go into generating the pyramid. Now, the scores on the pyramid are relative, so the triangles are relative to each other, but there's no analyst bias involved. Every single score is set. Every single score is completely generated from facts and provable, auditable facts. This is our number one key differentiator. And by the way, whenever we publish a pyramid, that data is from that day. It's not from last week. It's not from 3 months ago. It's not from 6 months ago. It's from that day. Because this is our scores. We're updating the updating the aquarium continuously. And so you need to be able to know how a particular product or vendor is at any given time. And that's what we're showing with pyramids.
Thanks. So let's talk a little bit about how to read a pyramid, and then we'll get to see some real live ones that have just been generated. So this is a sample here, and you'll see we have all the companies plotted. Now, going up the left side, we have what we call the performance index, and that's a company's market presence and success in the industry. So, as they go up the left, the higher up you go, the better performance you typically going to have compared to the market. On the right side, the right axis, we have what we call the strategic index. Now, as I mentioned briefly earlier, that looks more at a company's portfolio, looks at a company's products, modernity, updates, even things that aren't necessarily product related, but just a breadth, maybe the size of their ecosystem, partners, so forth, things like that. So, and again, the higher up you are, and relative right to left depends on how well that company is doing. Now, when we look at the triangles themselves, we have our, oops, wrong button. We have our, sorry, one more thing. We have our sparks. Now, our sparks are the vendors that are not always going to show up on a conventional analyst benchmark model. And these are going to be typically smaller companies, often early entrants, but we think that they need to be called out because they're doing something really interesting in the market and that they pose the potential to become disruptors and to really be moving up in the market in a very short time. Now, in terms of the triangles, most of them, as you see, are going to be blue. If they're pointing upwards, that means that the company that in that particular market has improved their performance since the last time a pyramid was generated. Now, these pyramids will be generated twice a year publicly, though on the aquarium, if you are a member of Lionfish and you have access to the aquarium, you can see them in more real time. But for the published versions, they will be up every 6 months. So if a company has improved their position over the last one, they will be pointing up. Obviously, these are our new ones today, so everybody's pointing up, but we'll see in 6 months how this looks. Conversely, if they're pointing down, that means their position has worsened a bit since the last time we ran a pyramid. Now, there's one more really important feature in here that I want to discuss, and those are, you'll see some of the pyramids are greens with little lines on them, and those are really the difference makers, as we say. Every market is going to have a particular characteristic or metric or quality that if a vendor possesses this, it's really going to have them stand out. Doesn't necessarily mean they're at the top of the pyramid, but in this case, company G is somewhere in the middle, company H is a spark, but it means that they're really excelling in that one characteristic that is really important to the market. And you'll see examples of that as we go through the next 3 live pyramids here. So let's go and move on to that.
And with that, let me introduce Scott Nelson. Scott is lead market manager for Agentic AI. Scott is basically a god in AI. And with that, Scott, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. And this is not my digital twin that's doing this broadcast. It's an actual human. The agentic AI market is a great example of why we built the pyramid. And as a matter of fact, it was the first market we looked at when we were developing all this. The agentic AI market is changing so rapidly that any traditional tool is woefully out of date by the time it's published. For definition purposes, agentic AI basically means the layer in an organization between the language models, stuff like ChatGPT or Grok on one side, and the operational systems like ERP and CRM on the other. It's the layer that has the agents that are moving information back and forth, making decisions, things of that sort. And so agentic AI is one that clients always want to know what's going on, but it's constantly changing in technology. The use cases are evolving seemingly daily, and new market entrants are given in this space. So in the initial pyramid that we developed for agentic AI, what we saw was that there are some key players that were at the top of the pyramid, and the difference maker attribute that we looked at for them is customer experience. The reason we keyed in on this is customer experience is critical right now in helping firms figure out agentic AI. You can't just buy these systems, hope you get them all integrated properly, and start running them. You're going to take a bunch of flawed processes and run them more quickly through AI and get really corrupted, broken processes more rapidly than you did before. So these are firms that we feel do a really strong job of the customer experience side of things, even as they're handling all the other aspects that we evaluate on the pyramid. This is a market that we expect to change very dramatically almost daily. We're going to see new entrants coming into this market, others leaving. We're going to see mergers. We're going to see more offerings from large players in the space trying to knock the little guys out who are highly innovative. So this is our first agentic AI pyramid. It really looks at the maturity, influence, and acceleration potential and the depth of capability and market integration of some of the key players out there for those organizations who inevitably are going to try to figure out how they're going to make agentic AI revolutionize their business. Rob, back to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. I wish I knew 1/10 what you know about AI. But Scott is right. The reality is, initially, we're only doing pyramids for markets that don't exist and aren't rated elsewhere. Why? Because this is what's most important. Who can wait a couple, 2, 3 years, 4 years before an analyst firm decides to publish a rating? What you need to know as a buyer, quite frankly, is this is a new market. I need to buy software in agentic AI because guess what? If you don't, AI will crush you. And so you have to understand how things are evolving, and it evolves so fast that it's important to change and keep up with the change. And so, speaking of keeping up with change, ransomware, well, one of my standard lines is you will always get ransomware. You cannot stop it. However, what you can do is stop the spread of it. And I'm a novice when it comes to ransomware. Mark Harris, on the other hand, is considered probably the single #1 expert in the world. And so I turn it over to Market Manager for anti-ransomware, Mark Harris.
Thanks, Rob. I'm not sure I'm necessarily the best person, most knowledgeable person. That may well be somebody in some Russian apartment somewhere. Yeah, so anti-ransomware, I think the challenge with this as a market is nearly every cybersecurity market has some element of anti-ransomware discussion. You know, it's such an important topic. It's still incredibly prevalent. You know, here in the UK, recently we've had a number of outages of large retail firms and a whole host of problems that have been very public as a result of ransomware. And nearly every single cybersecurity vendor says, yes, we do anti-ransomware. But there are also a number of specific vendors that are focusing on anti-ransomware either as their only proposition. So the likes of Halcyon have been around for quite a while, and their focus is primarily anti-ransomware. That's the main focus for them. And the same with companies like Bullwall. So their main focus is anti-ransomware. They're not covering all of the other sort of endpoint protection, antivirus capabilities. They're often an add-on to existing tools. So that's why we picked on this. The key sort of piece that we're looking at, the green and black stripe ones, is actually the ransomware recovery component, because as Rob quite rightly said, you can't necessarily prevent ransomware. You need to be able to respond very quickly. So a lot of the products here are focusing on not only protection, but also immediate response and recovery of data. So it's an interesting market. There are quite a few new vendors arriving. There's some vendors that have sort of pivoted from other capabilities. So Morphosec has been doing what they call moving target defense for quite some time, which is an endpoint product trying to prevent exploits. But again, they've sort of pivoted to be a more anti-ransomware focus. ThreatLocker, on the other hand, is more an application control allow listing, but again has got a focus on anti-ransomware, or a product offering that's focusing on anti-ransomware. And Bullwall is an interesting one because it's I think it's the only one in the pyramid that isn't endpoint based. It's all focused on containment and runs on the network, looking for signs of ransomware. So it's an interesting market. It's one that's dynamically changing. You know, a lot of the vendors are sort of fairly new and evolving, and will continue to get a lot of interest because ransomware is still a huge problem. So it's an interesting market to analyze and review, and therefore, you know, seem the obvious choice for a pyramid.
Thanks, Mark. One question. You know, in our previous life, if you were bottom left or bottom of anything, you were always thought of as bad and avoid. But here we have armed cyber as a Sparks. What makes them interesting?
I think it's the techniques they're using, and they're combining both the sort of detection and prevention capabilities as well as recovery. So they look at misuse of living off the land tools, detecting and blocking those, and as well as protecting the data. So they're an interesting company, relatively new, received some quite good backing from well-known names. So yeah, they have the potential to take off, and they're using sort of the best of all the different techniques from several other vendors. So yeah, they're interesting to watch.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's really important to note is if you're on the pyramid, it means you're an interesting vendor. These are new markets, markets where nobody's been rating them, or they haven't been rated in a very long time, and there's no current information. And as such, if you're here, you're important. And it doesn't matter if you're top left, bottom right, mid center. Anybody on the pyramid is a vendor you should be evaluating if you're a CIO or a CISO. Now, welcome to my world. So workspace security is my domain, and honestly, it's a market I've been waiting for years, if not decades, to be honest. If you're not familiar with it, it's the convergence of endpoint and network, really XDR plus SASE. There's a lot more to it than that, throw in identity and throw in a bunch of other features. But in the end of the day, you have SASE vendors and you have XDR vendors all playing in the same pool. Or you have some people who do a little bit of both. For example, take Zscaler. They don't have a full SASE, they have an SSE, and they do a bit of endpoint, but they're not CrowdStrike. And they're certainly not Palo Alto or Fortinet or Checkpoint, who, you know, do endpoint security and play in this endpoint game in extreme detail. But, you know, because this is so different, anybody who knows IT knows that the network team and the endpoint team probably don't like each other. They don't play together nicely. They don't talk very often. It's a battle between network and endpoint. And now with workspace security, the two are playing together and becoming one team. This is a huge evolution in security. And as a CISO, you have to say, okay, what products do I really care about and want to look at if I want to converge, limit my tools, limit my license cost, and overall truly say, hey, one vendor, you know, single vendor strategy in security was always bad because you want a defense in depth. But in this particular case, it's becoming, the tools are very narrowly close to each other. And so now you want interoperability and better functionality overall in a single platform. And so our difference maker, the green triangles with the stripes, is SASE. Because, you know, look at CrowdStrike. Everybody, if you look at every rating system out there, everybody says, oh, CrowdStrike leader, CrowdStrike wave, whatever. But in this case, if you truly want a product that's working together, endpoint and SASE network, look at Fortinet, look at Cato, look at Cisco, look at Palo. These guys have very strong, really best of breed SASEs together with endpoint. And Cato is somebody quite interesting being a Spark because they've never been an endpoint. They're a SASE vendor now moving into endpoint the other way around, where you look at the Palos and Cisco's of the world, where they've been network vendors too, but also heavily in endpoint. So this market is going to evolve very, very fast. And this is why we're tracking it. And this is why it's the first pyramid we are putting out together with agentic AI and anti-ransomware, because we view all three markets as very hot, interesting, and volatile. Back to you, Roberta.
Great, thank you. Well, thanks, Don. It's been great to look through all the pyramids. And before we get to our questions from the audience, maybe we can talk a little bit about what's next.
Well, first and foremost, our goal, and you may have seen it on LinkedIn, is to have at least 20 pyramids out by December. Next week, we're putting out 4 CCAS, CNAP, network security, microsegmentation, and UCAS. Every week, our goal is to not just do security, not just do infrastructure and ops, but to do a mixture of both. And these will only be markets where there hasn't been rating done in either a very long time, in the case of UCAS and CCAS, or something really new like CNAP that's evolving very quickly. And so all of that will be on our webinar next week, which will be focused for marketing and analyst relations professionals.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, let's get to some of the questions now. Looks like we've got some that have already come in. I was watching the ticker go up as we were talking. Rob, you want to get us started?
Yeah,
let's go for it.
let's start off with the top.
Yeah.
Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous, don't be afraid, don't be shy. I won't name and shame. I'll just call you out by your first name. Can you, and please put more into the chat, because I know everybody's familiar with the other rating systems out there and this is new. And this is a perfect question about that. Can you give us an example of the types of sources? How can it be trusted? Well, first off, no source can be trusted. It all has to be manually verified. This is our differentiator. As for types of sources, we're adding more every day to documentation from somebody's website, from rating sites, from LinkedIn, from Glassdoor, every single public source we can get our hands on. But also what's really important is for vendors who do buy an aquarium license, you have your own private instance and you can upload your own documents, and with your own documents, see how it impacts you versus the competition, to see maybe you're about to release a new feature and you want to see the impact on the market. But the short answer is I don't trust anything on the internet, and I certainly don't trust anything from AI. I have to reiterate, they're a child that can't be left alone in a room.
Great. You want to take another question here?
Yeah, sure.
We
Why
can
not?
say,
Is this vendor
yeah.
focused or buy side focused? Well, that's a good question. It's a good question because this is new for us and we're evolving. And it's a cheat to say both. But I think it's really, if you're not an aquarium client, it's definitely buy side focused. But if you are an aquarium client, it's absolutely vendor focused, because at any given time, as Roberta said, you can log into the aquarium and see a pyramid that's generated this second. You can't use, to be exact, every 15 minutes we're regenerating pyramids, to put some mathematics on it. With all new data. In the aquarium, we guarantee with our SLA, the data is being updated at least once a day. But like during times of major shows like Black Cat or whatever, we end up having to do updates almost every hour based on the latest information. And so the short answer is, if you're just looking at the graphic, it's definitely buy side focused. If you're an aquarium client, you can see where your pyramid is. Did it go up? Did it go down? How well you're performing, what you need to focus on. These 52 set variables and all the market specific variables, not only do we tell you the scores, we give you detailed explanations of how that score was calculated for that vendor. So you can see exactly, oh, this vendor had an 8 in social media because of this reason, or this vendor had a 5 because of that reason. And they can work on improving their strategy. And as Roberta said, we're publishing them twice a day. And with them
Here.
publishing twice a year, sorry, not twice a day, we're publishing them twice a year, and it's the snapshot in time from then. And that's the only time we'll put them out for the actual public.
And I'd like to just interject there that we are also, as part of the CIO/CTO CISO survey that we have in the field right now, we are also building an advisory board of IT executive buyers from the buy side, because we would like to ensure that our pyramids today and going in the future are reflecting the needs, the priorities of the buy side. Because at the end of the day, that's what really fuels all these markets, right? Is the purchasing of these solutions. So if you are a C-suite IT person or head of IT in your organization and you would like to learn more, do please reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to give you more information about that. So we will have an advisory board as well, to ensure that there's a balance there and that there's value, for the buyer and the vendor.
Next one. How do you ensure the standard data points match an organization's buying requirements? That's a very good question. Well, I started Lionfish just over 4 years ago as just me, myself, and I. Today, we're just under 35 former analysts. And between us, we have well over 500 years industry experience. And yes, it means we're old IT people, but we're also some young IT people too. We're not just a bunch of old IT people who've been around. The point is, the market expert is literally a market expert. And it's not like one person just rules it all. Everything goes through extensive peer reviews. But more importantly than all of that is the fact that we're always looking at how something's evaluated. Today, it's 52 set values. Tomorrow, it may be 55 or it may be 48. It just depends on how things are evolving with the aquarium. But then the market specific ones, we can add at any time or remove at any time as well. For example, say workspace security, anti-ransomware becomes its own specific call out item. We didn't add anti-ransomware as a market specific value and score everybody on anti-ransomware. And as an end user, you could get a full report of each vendor and each vendor's detailed scores and how they scored that. As a vendor, you can see how you scored and your competition scored and why you need to be better. Next
Hey,
one,
question
Jessica.
here.
Thank you, Jessica, for using your name. How do you indicate no change in one of the axes? Honestly, I have no idea yet.
Well,
We have 6 months to figure it out. We're open to
our
suggestions.
default will probably be the pointing up triangle, but yes, we will definitely. And as things change from one industry to the other, there's a certain amount of relativeness to built in, since so relative to everybody else. So there could also be, we want the metrics, the triangles, to be mostly reflective of the company's performance vis-a-vis their last one, but because everybody is plotted at a relative, they might still move a little bit. So I think our default probably be a pointing up, but that's an excellent question and one that we will, as you said, Rob, work through in the future iterations.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think there will ever be no change
It's
because
hard
of
to
the
find. Yeah, it's hard to imagine
relative
within the
nature.
context of a mart. Yeah, you have 80
Yeah,
plus variables, that it'll never change. Agreed.
it's because if one score changes on one vendor, everybody moves. They may move. We used to joke that vendors would get out a magnifying glass and a ruler to see where their dot position had moved. And honestly, with a pyramid, you're going to need to do it every day because every day your dot might move, your triangle might move up, might move down, might move left, might move right, but it's only going to be published twice a year. This is the key thing. In the aquarium, you see where you are this second, but for the public buying guides, it will be twice a year. Next is JD. And by the way, JD, first off, thank you because you like the objective and real-time dynamic nature of the rankings. So do I, because this, to me, has always been my biggest problem with the lights of waves, quadrants, and marketscapes is that the data is 3, 6, 9 months out of date when it's published, where we're current on the day. So, but how do you take into account the strength of the company's roadmap, innovation, information, which may not be entirely described in the realm for AI to scrape, and factor that into the ranking? Roadmap is clearly an important criteria for buyers. You darn well know it. I couldn't have said it better myself. Roadmap is one of the key indicators on the y-axis. We are looking at extreme detail. Now, I'd like to tell you we have our spies, because we do, of course, have our spies. The one thing about IT is there's no 6 degrees of separation, there's 1 degree of separation. And so we always have a good handle of what's going on in the industry, but we do unlimited free vendor briefings. You're a vendor, you want to show us something, brief us, get in contact. We want to hear from you. We want to hear about your roadmap. We will treat vendor briefings as NDA material or include them in your aquarium ranking depending on how you want it reacted. At my former place, every vendor briefing was only NDA for 30 days. We are willing to do vendor briefings, treat them as NDA and not include them in the aquarium unless you explicitly tell us. But it's important for us to understand who you are and where you're going. And so with that, I would say it's from talking to customers, it's talking to advisories, customer advisory boards, and more importantly, it's coming from our spies and the vendors themselves.
I think the other, just to interject there, Rob, I think the other thing is, we look at not only what's been talked about as announcements, pre-announcements, but we also look at history. What's the roadmap that a vendor have they delivered on what they previously promised, which is often more insightful about than what they're promising in the future. So I think that's certainly the way I look at it. And in our former lives, it was less about what was promised in the future roadmap and what was actually delivered in the past 6 or 12 months. So I think there's a lot we can infer about the direction of travel of a vendor based on what they've done and what they're talking about doing in the future.
Thanks, Mark. That's beyond agree.
So I
Now,
think we have time
next
for a couple
question.
more questions. Yeah.
Yeah, we got an army of questions still. There's still 8 open ones coming, and I'm sure there'll be more before we end. The next one, though, I love because I love how it sounds. I won't name you, but you know who you are. How much does it cost to license the pyramid? So, we're not answering this question today, but if you reach out to me or Roberto or one of your contacts in either of our 2 companies, we can answer that for you, or you can join our webinar next Thursday where we're going to lay out the entire business models around the aquarium licensing and the pyramid reprint licensing costs. But today we just want you to see the pyramid, understand the importance of it, understand how the rating system works, and see 3 important pyramids, because after this week, we're not going to actually name who the vendors are corresponding on the triangles on the published pyramids that we publish. We're just going to publish the triangles and a list of vendors that go with it. So anybody who wants to figure that out, well, it'll be kind of a game. Guess who's on the pyramid and where? So now,
Great
I've
question.
got one question twice where the guy reworded it. Hi, Steve. Try again with all words. Will Lionfish be prepared to be transparent about the vendors it works with and the extent of the relationship in play? Absolutely, positively, 100% yes. Understood that we will be under NDAs, but being an aquarium client does not mean your pyramid score improves. Under no circumstances are we pay to play under any circumstances whatsoever. In fact, it's the exact opposite. You can say in the aquarium, but you can't say, oh, why did I get this score? Well, it's very clear why you got this score. It's for you to figure it out. If you want help improving your score, sure. You can hire us or another firm to help you improve your product. But the aquarium is going to be very specific about what's good and what's bad about your product. It already is with 62 variables on average. And so I, when I had my company Mobile Active Defense a lifetime before I was an analyst, we were awarded by an analyst firm the vendor of the year in this particular place, and we got super excited and thought, cool. So then, we were a startup with no money, and we bought a reprint license. And I tell you, it was so hard on us as a startup, and we want to work with companies who are sparks and treat them right, but it doesn't mean we're going to go out of our way and give them better scores or better positioning or anything else. Because in the end of the day, we've all been a startup and we understand the challenges of a startup, but that doesn't mean because you become a Lionfish client, you suddenly get to the top of the pyramid. Or because you become a Four Quarters client, you become top of the pyramid. That's never going to happen.
I think that goes to our next question here too. It seems the user would be, do you see that one?
Yeah, it seems user would be guided to subsets of pyramid based on the buying patterns. Are you most comfortable with the major vendors? Are you seeking competitive advantages by going with a Spark? Is that a sound conclusion? Um, Roberta, you answer that one because I keep answering. You
Sure.
can answer that
Well,
one.
I think it really depends on the on the buyer. If I'm understanding the question correctly, is it basically saying, is there a natural tendency to go to one or the other? And I think it just really depends on the buyer. The way I view it is when you're looking at, you're looking at the pyramid. If you're as a buyer, a relatively conservative organization, you really need to make sure you've got your security there. You've really got to make sure, you're working with a vendor who's a stalwart. Maybe you don't need all the bells and whistles. Maybe you're not evolving as quickly. Then, you might be going to somebody who's a little bit towards the left, maybe a little bit higher up. If you're in another industry that is always evolving, maybe you've got you need to get a new app out every other week, and you got to get new functionalities on your app all the time, and you need really the best security. Or you're, let's say, in a consumer market where you just have to change the customer experience frequently, and you need a platform that can evolve and change and anticipate what you're doing. You might be going more towards the right, and maybe even looking at a Spark, somebody who is really hitting those needs that you have to be dynamic and evolve, and you maybe have a lot of vendors. You don't necessarily need somebody who's a stalwart. So it's really going to depend on the buyer's needs, and that's what we're trying to communicate here in our graphic.
Thanks, and I beyond agree with you.
But-
So the next one is, and once again, this is anonymous, but whoever you are, I love you. How do you ensure there's no analyst bias to where a company is placed? Well, this is our USP, full stop. We absolutely positively offer full transparency. We will tell you, you will see, if you're an aquarium client, you will see each and every single score of every single vendor. You will see how the weights are calculated. You will see the write-ups on each and every vendor. And you could say, oh, but they have an 8 and this vendor has a 6 and they do the same thing. Well, we'll tell you exactly in detail why that one had an 8 in social media and the other one had a 6. And because every score is calculated exactly the same way, regardless of the vendor, regardless of product. I don't care if you're the biggest of the big, a la the Microsoft, Cisco's, Palos, CrowdStrikes of the world, or the smallest of the small, like people like Cato or any of the other ones who are really in the Sparks and coming up vendors. To us, this is our true differentiator. We are removing analyst bias. It's the thing that always bothered us most. The triangles fall where the triangles fall. I don't care if you're a client or not. It just doesn't matter.
I'm gonna take one here too, because I think this is a pretty important question. So we've talked a lot about so the question is, Roberta, is from an anonymous person. What's the relationship between four quarters and forecasters? So if you've seen a lot of our activity on social media, we've been talking about forecasters here today, which is our content hub, but you'll be seeing a lot of that social media coming from Four Quarters. Four Quarters is our parent organization. We are a firm that collaborates and provide with analysts, independent advisors, and experts, and very much with Lionfish and their team of advisors. We create Four Quarters marketing solutions that are branded by the analysts and brand and with their third-party point of view. So I think it's a very powerful value proposition for the industry, and that's one of the reasons why we created the Forecasters web page platform, because we felt that the analysts that we work with, there was a mutually beneficial way for them to promote their independent third-party observations and insights and research, and that's the connection between the two. And so, because Forecasters is a brand neutral site, that is why we are publishing it through Forecasters along with on Lionfish's site and through their avenues as well. So hopefully that was helpful, and more than happy to go further into detail offline if anybody wants to connect with me or any of my colleagues. Also, tune in for next week. As next week we'll have the CEO of FOURCORTERS, Gary Robbins, on that call as well, and we'll be going into more detail about that.
Thanks, Roberta.
Okay. Yeah, you
So
bet,
we have
Rob.
two that are very similar together, and one that is just asking about grading. So Stan asks, essentially grading on a curve. And I guess the short answer is yes, because everybody is relative to everybody else. And so everybody included, first and foremost, who's on the pyramid is a vendor of note. There's somebody important. And there's somebody we're tracking, somebody we're interested in. Our internal limit is 15 vendors to a pyramid, because we think more than that is just confusing, especially for a new market. So we're looking at 15 at the moment. That might change in the future, but today it's 15 or less. And so that comes to, and they're all point on the pyramid adjusted relative to each other's scores. And so this is why if one score changes, the question before about if your point doesn't move, how do you know? Well, if one score changes, you all change. So Meredith asks, if you're a vendor on one of the upcoming periods, do you share previews with vendors before you publish a pyramid? I call a German word here, and that's Jein. Jein means yes and no. So if you, a vendor, are an aquarium client, any day, any hour, any second, you can log into the aquarium and see your pyramid right now. How does it stand right now? Now, if we're publishing tomorrow, I can't guarantee you that's going to be the pyramid tomorrow, but it's going to probably be something close to it, unless this is the middle of a trade show and major things are happening, or there's like, AI is laying off 15,000 people kind of news that impacts the market. So if you're an aquarium client, absolutely, positively, you can see exactly where you are at any time. If you're not, no. And the only way you'll see where you are is when somebody chooses to publish it, not before. So then Ryan asked, you mentioned pyramids focus on markets not currently or rarely covered. Great and interesting and in real time. Absolutely, yes.
Agreed.
How might you factor in existing markets that may warrant Lionfish covering, or the impact topics you've chosen to cover in pyramids? Really good question. And this is where we need all of your help. As I said, we're just under 35 former analysts, and Lionfish gets bigger every day. And with our partnership with FOURCORTERS, we get bigger every second. Suggest to us some markets you would like to see pyramids on. We're doing 20 this year. What 20 or what other, because 7 out of the 20 are decided. What other 13 would you like to see? Well, I'd like to see MDR. I'd like to see AI dev. I'd like to see a bunch of other stuff too. But what would you like to see? You can help drive our research agenda. And so please, and if you are a vendor and you want us to track a particular market that's not tracked publicly, get in touch and we'll talk and we'll figure it out. But just because you do that doesn't mean you're going to be on top of the pyramid. It just means we might do a market sooner.
And I would add that there are 2 of you on this call who know me very well. You know who you are. And I can tease that both of you will be on a pyramid that we'll be working on next week. So reach out to me if you want to talk about it.
Bernie, because there hasn't been, Bernie asks how is CCAS and UCAS not currently covered? It's real simple. There hasn't been anything on it in a very long time. And that's a perfect example of not a new market, a well-established market, but where it's lacking current information.
Well, and also I would add on that one, since that's one that I know, we cover them as two separate markets at this point while the buying decisions are being made that way. As the markets start to coalesce more and more and our clients want to talk to us about unified solutions, we would morph the market coverage into a unified solution, kind of as Rob was talking about at the beginning with some of the changes going on in his space.
And that, by the way, was another question from Anonymous. And with that, we have no more questions, but if somebody has a last minute question, please type it right now. Otherwise, we'll close the webinar in a minute. And I, as Lionfish, and Scott and Mark, want to thank you as Lionfish. However,
And definitely.
Roberta,
Go ahead.
we've got one more.
Well, and I'd like to thank you from Forecasters and Four Quarters as well.
Well, we got a last sneak in.
Oh, we do have
That
one.
one's for you.
Yeah. Derek Fennell.
Fuel market signals showing that buying intent is shifting towards a UC and CC combo.
Okay, good to know. Well, that
Good
might
to
have
know.
to be our update in 6 months on that market.
Yeah. With that, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Have a fabulous weekend wherever you might be going. And please do stay in touch and please let us know what your ideas are.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you. Goodbye.